So you want to know what mods are actually good in Vault Hunters, right? Well, this tier list is going to help you out because we're going to look at every single mod in Vault Hunters, what it's good for, and also compare it to all of the others. So we've got all of the mods in this lovely little chest here, and we're going to start with one of my favourite mods, which is Modular Routers. Now for me, Modular Routers is pretty much guaranteed to be an S tier mod, but why do I like it so much? Well, let's have a look at some of the times that I've used it. So during the Mastermind Game Show we hosted, we used it to drop keys to our lovely contestants who got questions right. We also used it to reveal secret loot behind hidden doors, all done with Modular Routers, and in my guide I even made a diamond breaking machine that works at incredible speed. Modular Routers is extremely versatile, one of the best if not the best handling mods in all of Vault Hunters. Granted, it's not going to build a mob farm for you, but it is going to be able to make that mob farm much more manageable. And for that reason, it's going straight into S tier, absolutely no question about it. One of the best mods in all of Vault Hunters. Now, of course, you can't move items around if you don't have any items, so let's look at Snad, because Snad helps you actually generate items. You can use Snad to generate items very quickly. You can make almost instant one-tick farms. They are fantastic. It is an amazing... Oh, wait, it increases cost by 12 points? I guess in that case, it needs to go into D tier. You can't have just a general utility mod increasing the price of all the other production mods by 12 points. That's kind of ridiculous. If it didn't do that, I'd probably be putting it somewhere like A or B tier, but it's D tier because of that. I know we're going through these pretty quickly, but there's a lot of mods to get through, and if you want some more details on the mods, there's plenty of guides on my channel for you to look at these mods in a little bit more depth, and I'll make some recommendations for some other mods if I don't have any guides on them. So this next mod I was ready to put in either C or D tier. However, just as I was filming, the potions got updated in Vault Hunters. I'm not even joking, it was literally while we were recording this, so I've had to pause the recording and go and test these out. But what I can say is that the new potions and the new brews are absolutely wild. For example, reducing active cooldowns by 40% is insane, and even things like restoring 160 mana on a brew is just, it's wild. It really is. There's also 3 different types of brews that you can get. So you have the Pacifist brew, which will restore itself over time. You have the Goblins brew, which will restore itself based on the amount of chests that you open. And the Slaughterer's brew, which is based on mob kills. So it caters a lot more for different playstyles. I do have one concern, however, and that is when we look at things like the mixtures, this doesn't seem too bad for Vault Diamonds and a Pog, but when you go to enchant it, you're going to need another 32 Vault Diamonds and another 32 gold, which is a good trade-off. However, it is still very expensive. It does get a little bit wild for the brews though, because in order to do the brews, you're going to need another 20 Vault Diamonds plus an Echo Pog, and then to add the extra enchantment, you're also going to need a stack of Vault Gold and a stack of Vault Diamonds. So even though this is absolutely fantastic, I definitely recommend getting at least the first level, just it's going to be a huge benefit. I am not 100% convinced that it is worth the cost, especially sort of until mid to late game, probably actually very late game. I think because of that, we're going to have to put it in A tier. I did want to put it in S tier because it is really powerful, but I think the cost drops it down a little bit. It's less useful early game, very useful late game. So A tier, I think, is fair, based on the very limited time we've had to play with it. Okay, I think it's time to look at some storage mods, because storage mods are the backbone of Vault Hunters, and I think the first one we're going to have to look at is something like Colossal Chests. Now, Colossal Chests basically does what it says on the tin. It's a big chest, a very big chest. And these chests can fit an absolutely insane amount of stuff in here. Like if we scroll down, I haven't even been able to put enough stuff in to properly showcase how crazy this is. But there is so much room for stuff in here. But that in itself is the problem, because there is no search function. If we have a normal chest, we can go in, go and filter, and if we've got some leaves in here, we can type in, say, leaves, and it will highlight it for us. But if we go into this chest and we want to find some of this stripped walnut wood, well, there's nowhere to search for it, so it's actually not quite as good there. But bear in mind, this is factoring it in by its own merits alone. If you use this as a way to get additional storage for things like applied energistics, refined storage, things like that, then it actually becomes really, really useful for just mass storing items, and then you don't need as many drives. I prefer the drives, but this is definitely a solution that you can use if you are short on resources. I think for this one, it offers some storage options, but because you can't filter it, you can't really rely on it as a main storage option. It's more like a storage augment, so I'm going to put it down in C tier. I think there's a very good argument for pushing it to B tier, but I think C tier in the context of the other mods seems pretty fair. Alright, so to keep this tier list balanced, we need a B tier mod, and I think I have the perfect one. It even starts with a B, and that is Botany Pots. Oh, some people are not going to like that one. Well, Botany Pots I think is B tier. Why do we think it's B tier? It is because it costs a lot of resources to be able to automate it properly, unless you use modular routers. But then, that's more of a testament to modular routers than it is to Botany Pots. Now, there's two types of Botany Pots. There's the normal Botany Pot and there's the Hopper Botany Pot. There's not a huge amount of difference between the two. The normal Botany Pot needs you to right-click it in order to harvest it once it is fully grown, whereas as you see behind me, the Hopper Botany Pot automatically drops it into a container that is below it. The problem comes with the cost of the Botany Pots. So if we look at the normal Botany Pot, it is not too bad, except for the fact that the packed Vault Meat blocks are extremely expensive. You need 81 Vault Meat in order to make one single Botany Pot, and realistically, if you're relying on Botany Pots, you're going to need quite a lot of them, so all of your Vault Meat is going to go on these, and you don't actually get it as often as you would expect. The bigger issue comes with the Hopper Botany Pot, because 2 black chromatic steel is extremely expensive for each individual Botany Pot. If you're wanting to automate every single item in the game, you're probably going to need about 20 to 30 Botany Pots, so that is a huge amount of investment just for an automatic farm. It's powerful, but it is insanely expensive. So whether it's down to the Vault Meat cost or the fact that you need a bunch of black chromatic steel, it does drop the Botany Pots down a tier. I would have previously put them in A tier, but now they're going to go into B tier instead. But we can take solace in the fact that it now has a nice line of symmetry. Okay, we're going to start speeding things up and look at 2 mods at once, and these are Mob Spawners and Cagerium. These are basically your 2 mob spawning mods, and one is definitely better than the other. It's Mob Spawners. Mob Spawners is just the better one. Now, I have an entire video on why Ice Spawners is better than Cagerium, and it basically comes down to the rates that you can get from it. But essentially, Mob Spawners is fantastic because it gives you so many more mobs, and Cagerium is an AFK sort of passive way of doing things, but in reality, it's a little bit more expensive, and Mob Spawners has actually had an update since then, which makes it even more powerful. Because Cage Dust no longer drops from Mob Spawners, you can just use some Larimar, very common, and some Chromatic Steel in order to make it, which means that your spawners are much better. That being said, Cagerium is still quite a good mod, so I'm still going to put Cagerium up here in A tier. It's very good if you have a lot of resources and you can passively generate all of your resources. But Ice Spawners is without a doubt an S tier mod. You can just build crazy spawner farms with Ice Spawners. Now, there's a very special category in Vault Hunters that we call quality of life. Now, these 5 mods here are actually amazing for one really important reason, and that is that they don't increase the cost of other mods. Now, if you were to unlock something from Power, it'd increase this by 6, but the quality of life mods don't increase anything. Now, in my books, they get extra points just for that, but some of them are also really powerful. A Vault Compass is going to be able to let you find your way through the vault, and honestly, I cannot live without this mod. This is one of the best things ever because you no longer need to track your way through the vault. Not just that, but you can also set your Vault Compass to target a specific objective, which it will then point towards, and is really good for things like elixir vaults or for scavenger vaults. That to me makes this mod an S tier mod, absolutely essential for my playthroughs. If you don't get lost as much as me, you probably put it a little bit lower, but I love having it. One of the first ones that I always unlock. Now, elevators is also a very cool mod if you're wanting to travel very short distances, going up and down. Basically, it stops you needing to build any stairs and makes things a little bit more accessible. I have one of these in our guide house, so we can just go down and arrive at our own little mob spawner farm, and it just means that you can have these little secret bases underneath your normal base, and the only way you're going to be able to get in here is if you know where the elevator is. In my case, it's pretty obvious, but you can also disguise it as different blocks as well, so that you're not having like big holes that you need to jump down. Very, very good. Now that we're here though, I can also show you what my biggest use for the trash cans mod is, because I use it as an energy overflow. If you've got a fission reactor like this, which we will cover later on, you can set your trash can to take in the overflow of energy, so that once this energy cube is completely full, it won't all back up and cause this reactor to explode. Very good safety measure to have. I really like this. It's also really good for just cleaning up junk from a mob farm, so I really like it. My community really likes this mod, but it's still not the best mod in the world. Let's be honest, it's just a trash can, and there's plenty of ways to avoid different items. And I think for that reason, we're going to have to put trash cans in C tier, and I think elevators is probably slightly more useful in more situations, so we'll put elevators in B tier. So we've got Vault Compass in S, elevators in B, and trash cans in C. Now that leaves us with Waystones and Torchmaster. Now we've actually used Torchmaster because we have a Mega Torch behind here to stop any mobs from spawning on this island. So it is quite useful for that, especially if you're building in like creative, it's very, very good. However, in your day-to-day playthrough of Vault Hunters, it's not actually that useful. There's a couple of niche vanilla farms that you can use it for, but realistically you're going to be using a lot of mods to do your farms, which won't need you to stop mob spawning, to be honest with you. That being said, I do really like this mod, so I think we're going to put it in C tier. Waystones, on the other hand, are going to need to go in either A or S tier. Why would they go in A and S tier? 2 words. Warp plates. So you know how the elevator allowed you to move up and down really easily? Well, a warp plate allows you to pretty much warp to wherever you want to. It is really, really good, and there's no limit on how far this will warp you. So for example, if you need ice from an ice biome, stick a warp plate there, and then you can go back to it whenever you want. It's a fantastic mod. You can also use the old-fashioned Waystones, but they're a little bit less cool. So for that reason, Waystones, S tier, really good for resource gathering. You can put them everywhere from granite caves to underwater biomes and all this sort of crazy stuff. It's very, very good. Honestly, one of the better utility mods, but in general, all of these are pretty good because they don't cost anything more than their just base cost. I like using these, I like unlocking these really early on, but some of them are just significantly better than others. Okay, so we still have a lot of mods to go. Let's speed things up a little bit. So let's take a look at the power mods. First up, iron generators. This mod is a trap. It might seem really good that you've got a 1-block solution to your energy needs, and you've got a generator that is very, very simple. It burns some coal for a long time, gives you some energy. However, this netherite generator requires an entire block of black chromatic steel, so it's super, super expensive, plus 4 entire blocks of netherite, and it only gives you 256 FE per tick. It means that you're going to need to unlock another power mod at some point in the future. 256 FE per tick is not going to cut it, especially when you're looking at mods like Mechanism that are going to use a lot of power. And the problem is, as soon as you unlock iron generators, all of the rest increase by 6. So what you could do is you could hold out and spend 5 on power, but instead you're going to be spending 11 on power, massively increasing the cost for you to make power in the future. So while it seems good on the surface, definitely not a good mod, one of the worst power mods. D tier. Flux networks. Really good for wireless power, but it doesn't actually generate any power for you, but it increases the cost of you being able to generate other power. It used to be quite good for chunk loading, less so now, it's not quite as good anymore. This is also going in D tier. You don't get actually anything from unlocking this, and it makes the other ones more expensive. Okay, controversial one, thermal dynamos. This one also goes in D tier. Why is it in D tier? Basically, because you have to unlock thermal expansion. We will get onto thermal expansion later. I have big gripes with thermal expansion, but the dynamos are also not that good in general. If we look at something like the Stirling Dynamo, you'll see that it is actually really bad energy production. Unless you start getting into the really advanced stuff, then you're not going to be able to generate very much power at all. Granted, you can increase this quite a lot by putting extra reaction chambers and different injectors and things like that into it. However, it's still not very high in terms of the actual production that you can get. So while something like this might actually be good for powering thermal expansion, then it's not going to be very good for powering giant machines, and there are much better options, especially for the price. I mean, this is 2 power, you might as well just go iron generators for 1, it's going to give you much better results. Okay, Botania Flux. This is an interesting one, because Botania is very strong, but Botania Flux comes at a bit of a weird time, to be honest with you. You need to unlock Botania to be able to unlock Botania Flux, makes sense really, but you don't actually need any Flux for Botania, really. It's kind of its own thing which uses mana. So you're getting this because you've already unlocked Botania, and then you've unlocked something else that needs some sort of energy, so for example a storage system, but it's a bit of a weird one. It's kind of like late game, but also early game. I think it sits in a bit of a strange place, to be honest with you, and for that reason, we're going to put it higher than the others, because I don't think it's a D tier mod at all. It can produce a lot of energy. I think realistically, it needs to go in B tier, because it's good, just a little bit too late game. Speaking of late game options though, you have Mekanism generators. Now these can produce a crazy amount of energy. So the fission reactor is actually one of the slowest of the Mekanism reactors. Well, of the multi-block structures anyway. And you can see that if we go to this turbine, it's already producing 28,000 FE compared to the like 40 to 200 that was being produced previously. And that's with the burn rate of this reactor at a very low level. If we increase this by, let's say 5 times, you can see that we're now getting 142,000 FE per tick. So yeah, things get a little bit crazy with your Mekanism reactors. And remember what I said? This is the weakest one, and it's a small reactor, so you can produce basically more energy than you could ever need if you're building something like this. Now, of course, it's not really fair to compare an end game piece of equipment to an early game one, so let's look at some early game ones. For example, we have a heat generator that just uses passive lava to produce 30 FE per tick, more than we were having before, and it's got a max output of 160, and this is very cheap to make. And then if we add a bunch of blocks of coal onto there, well, that's going to produce even more. It's going to go a little bit crazy. Oh yeah, and it doesn't actually cost any vault ingredients. You just need 1 osmium ingot, and the rest of it is all vanilla. It's just much better. Mekanism generators, much better than all of the other ones that we've seen so far. And I would put this in S tier. Realistically, I'm going to go and put it in A tier. Why are we going to put it in A tier? Well, because something is even better than Mekanism generators. Power. That's right, the best power mod is called Power. Okay, so why is Power so good? Well, let's look at a very basic thermo generator for Power. So this doesn't cost much at all, but if we go and put a lava bucket at the bottom, fill it with water, you can see it's generating 20 FE per tick, exactly the same as the other ones would. However, you can upgrade these generators and they become a little bit wild. For example, if we upgrade it all the way to Nitro, which is the max tier, well then all of a sudden, the same setup, just using passive lava generation. Also, I should note, you don't even need to have those there, you can just have it like this. That's now producing 2,000 FE per tick. Or, if you want to go even further, let's put some blazing crystals underneath it instead, and now you're at 5,600 FE per tick. So yeah, that's with no fuel, no upkeep, nothing. Just keep supplying it with water, which there's a million different ways to get water, and you'll just keep getting energy. Oh, sorry, did you think I'd stop there? No, we're not finished there. What about if we build a nuclear reactor, just using 1 click, instead of building it like we did with Mekanism? Yeah, this just builds it for you. Granted, this is really expensive, but when we go into it, you'll see it's a little bit more complicated, I'll be honest. So if you just top this up with some uranium, use some blue ice, some redstone, and some coal, all of a sudden, you're doing 450,000 FE per tick. and you can pull out like 2 million FE per tick without any problems at all. And funnily enough, this one also doesn't explode if things go wrong, so it's perfectly safe. If it runs out of water or whatever, it will just stop working. Basically, no crazy explosions and radiation. I genuinely can't emphasize to you how amazing power is. You could probably tell, this is also probably my second most favorite mod in all of Vault Hunters. Power is absolutely fantastic. It's going in S tier. If there was like a tier above S tier, it would go in that one as well. I can't praise power highly enough. Also, I've only scratched the surface of power. You've got wireless power, you've got charging, you've got so much stuff in here. If you want to see more about that, make sure to check out my guide on power. You will find it, just search power. I'll link it in the description as well, but you need to check it out. If you've not done power before, you need to check it out. All right, so let's quick fire the simple mods because these ones really don't need much explanation at all, and they basically speak for themselves. Drawers mod, pretty simple. You have drawers, different items go in drawers. You can take items out of drawers, no issues there. You can also see how many items are in each drawer. You can also conceal them so it doesn't render it and it reduces lag, and you can also lock them so even if you take the last one out, it will still stay as the actual item. And you also have drawer controllers so that you can just go in, you can double click on there, and then it will put the items in there. Ignore the fact I accidentally unlocked all the drawers. Very versatile mod, very, very good for standard storage, and you can also hook up your existing electronic storage into the drawer controller and use it the same way that we were looking at using the Colossal Chest earlier. Very, very good. I use this in my single player world. It's not game changing, but it's still fantastic. Goes in A tier. So let's look at pipes. Pipes is very easy. You just stick items in one place. It moves it through the pipe into another. Very, very simple. You can do this with fluids. You can do it with energy, all this sort of stuff. Nice and simple. It doesn't add a huge amount that other mods like Mekanism can't do, but it is a very good early game option. But it does increase the cost for things like dark utilities and modular routers, so it loses a few points for that one. We're going to stick this one in B tier. It's very good early game, but it gets outstripped a little bit later on when you start unlocking things like Mekanism. Building gadgets pretty much does what it says on the tin. You can select blocks, you can build with it, you can build a lot quicker than you could probably place them normally. You can do them in like massive strips like this. Very, very easy to use. However, it has very limited utility if you are not a builder for one reason, and that is because it is disabled in the vaults. So you can't build anything in the vaults using this. Basically, it's useful if you're a builder and you're building a mega base, but beyond that, really not that useful. It's going in D tier. I know a few of you will disagree, but it's very good for builders. If you are a builder, it's probably up in S or A tier, but for the majority of players, I would put it down in D tier. Maybe C. Very borderline on that one. So this next one looks really cool, but is actually completely useless, and that is mining gadgets. So you can basically mine with a laser beam. It's pretty cool. It's pretty fast, but it's actually not that useful at all, especially since you have to spend resources to unlock it. You can upgrade it so it's got Silk Touch and all this sort of stuff and increase the mining area, but it's still not very good. Why is it not very good? Well, because you have the Vault Hammer, so you can literally just run through and mine like this. And it's much easier to make, it's much easier to upgrade and customize, and yeah, it's just better, and you don't need to unlock any researches at all to do this. It's just faster. Mining gadgets, not useful at all anymore. As expected, this one goes in D tier as well. Junk management. Now, we had a little bit of a disagreement with the community when discussing this, because personally, I would put junk management into D tier because we now have pouches that void everything, and you've got a bunch of different options to dealing with your junk, and junk management is just really expensive. Just for the basic junk controller, you're going to need an Echo Pog to start with, and then as you start upgrading it, you need Echoes and Pogs, and then Echo Pogs, and then Echo Pogs, and then Omega Pogs, and it's just not worth it. Just make a load of backpacks and put void upgrades in them. I don't care what you guys say, I'm sticking with D tier. That being said, pouches, specifically getting bigger pouches up to backpacks and things like that, much, much more useful and very much worth putting your time and resources into. These ones are going right up into S tier. The better your storage, the less time you have to sort your storage, and the better loot you can get. and just you don't need to deal with junk management. So yeah, S tier, 100%. That being said though, I have a little bit of a gripe with the pouch upgrades. So these have been split. You now get your normal pouches for free. However, you need to pay additional research for stack upgrades, auto refill, and auto feeding. Now, auto refill I don't think is worth using at all. Auto feeding, very limited utility, but you're going to want to get your stack upgrade because they are very, very useful. The problem is this +2. You upgrade this, that means that your pouches, instead of costing 1, now do 3, then that'll go on to 5, then 7, then 9. So in the end, it's going to cost you quite a few more research points, but the stack upgrades is worth using. Absolutely, the stack upgrade is worth using. So this is going to go in B tier. I think it's not as good as just upgrading your pouches. However, the stack upgrade is worth probably A tier, the rest are C tier, so it averages out at B tier. Iron furnaces. You're probably expecting this in D tier, along with iron generators. However, I really like the iron furnaces. Okay, I might be a little bit biased at the fact that you can get a rainbow furnace, but in my defense, watch how quickly this burns through an entire stack of sand and turns it into glass. It's very useful if you're wanting to make glass. For mega builds, absolutely fantastic. For vault resources, still really good, especially if you're making things like charcoal, but overall, not a game-changing mod in the slightest. So we're going to put this in C tier. I think it's better than all of these ones, but it's not quite as good as things like your pipes or your feeding upgrades and all that sort of stuff. So easy villagers and easy piglins basically go hand in hand. The piglins are slightly less useful than the villagers, I would argue, because you get more stuff for the vaults from villagers, and you can make very easy emerald farms from the villagers as well. So these are useful, but not completely game-changing. We're going to put piglins in the C tier, and we're going to put villagers in the B tier. The B tier one is just better. Villagers are better than piglins, and then you can see that in the tier list, but realistically, there's not much between them, if I'm honest. So those are the ones that we can go through quickly. Let's dive into some of the big mods. Okay, so let's look at the storage systems for Applied Energistics and Refined Storage. So let's just build a Refined Storage system. You just do that, stick a drive in, and then that's it. You are pretty much good to go. And we've put some red wool and some planks in here, so if we want to go and make a red bed, you can just nice and simply just pull these in. We can pull them out of the storage system and use them in the overworld. We can put them back in from the overworld. Nice and simple, and you can hook this up to a drawer system, or you can hook it up to one of the colossal chests, or you can just rely entirely on the disk drives. This has 64,000 items it can hold. It's really, really good, and it's just better than having a chest monster. You should always have one of these systems, at least by the time you get to, I'd say, maximum level 30 in Vault Hunters. You should start having something similar to this. Now, with the AE2 Things mod as well, this has made AE2 a little bit easier. The crafting system is still a little bit annoying to deal with, but at least the storage system is basically identical to Refined Storage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put both of these into A tier. You absolutely want to get one of these. You don't need to get both. There's absolutely no point in getting both, but you need at least one of these, at least reasonably early game. Now, Mekanism QIO is basically Applied Energistics and Refined Storage, but not quite as good and locked behind Mekanism. So it is just a little bit lower than those. And when I say a little bit lower, a lot lower. This one is also going in D tier. It's just not needed. I don't really know how else to explain this one. You just don't need it because you have the other ones. There's like a couple of niche things that it can do, but yeah, just don't bother with it. And now we have the 4 big mods, those being Create, Mechanism, Botania, and Thermal Expansion. Now, Create is not my forte. However, we have a friend who is very good at Create, and we're going to have a word with him and find out why he thinks it's the best mod in Vault Hunters. Okay, DeJojo, welcome to Tier List Island. You're here to tell us how amazing Create is, right? And build us some simple contraption that's super cheap?
Absolutely, yeah. So Create, in my very humble opinion, is the best mod in Vault Hunters. It is just kind of the best bang for your buck. And what I'm wanting to show off is how is the belt missing a texture for you too, or is that just me?
It's just you.
Okay, cool. Is just how cheap it really, really is. Because a lot of the mods in Vault Hunters require you to have all these different kind of materials and resources. Sometimes other mods are like completely necessary. But here with Create, you'll find that what I'm building right now is an iron farm. And this iron farm doesn't cost a single piece of Larimar, not one. It is just going to cost you some simple resources like wood, iron, and I believe chromatic iron. Whoops.
Is this part of Create?
No, this is part of that I just woke up and I've forgotten to make a cobblestone generator. So now if you open it up, and that's pretty fast for 0 Larimar cost and a little bit of time. This took me 4 minutes to set up.
Yeah, it would have been 2.
Yeah.
It would have been 2, I think, if you'd have done it right the first time. But
that's true.
We're all good. Yeah, this is actually pretty cool. Like the only problem I have with Create is the floor space that it takes. I mean, going on to our next mod that we're going to look at, which is Mechanism, I feel like it's a lot more compact, but Create is definitely the cheaper option of the two. Mechanism uses a lot of Larimar and Black Opal, but we don't talk about the Black Opal. Thank you for showing us this awesome contraption, DeJojo. If you guys want to check out more Create stuff, then DeJojo's channel's all about Create, and the new pack called Create Arcane Shenanigans.
Engineering.
That's the one, Arcane Engineering. So yeah, make sure you go check him out and subscribe to his channel, and yeah, thanks very much. So on DeJojo's recommendation, we're going to put Create up in S tier, and then we move on to one of my favourite mods, which is Mechanism. And this might not be quite as straightforward as Create, but it can make some really cool things. Like, for example, it can turn one of the iron in here, run it through all of these machines, and you will end up with 5 iron at the end. So it is super cool. It works with chromatic iron as well, and it just does an absolute ton of stuff. Now, it is very complicated if you don't know what you're doing. But once again, I have a guide for that. So if you do want to learn how Mechanism works, including how your nuclear reactors work, then check out the channel. There are a bunch of guides on there for it. But this is, again, just a little sample of what Mechanism can do. You can make a bunch of different materials with it, and it's just really fun to play around with. Now, I am very, very tempted to put this next to Create in S tier, but I think given the cost, because this is actually quite an expensive setup to use, I think we're going to have to put it in A tier. It's very good, it's very borderline to S tier, but the price just brings it down a little bit. Really good, and it also unlocks your Mechanism generators, which are also fantastic. And the only other downside is Create makes its own energy. Mechanism would make its own energy, but it's locked behind Mechanism generators, so you're going to have some other sort of power mod, such as power or even Mechanism generators, in order to make this work properly. I still love it though, it's a fantastic mod. Okay, do you want to see how Botania makes a redstone farm? Well, it's quite simple. You just stand here and watch it just duplicate the redstone. If you close this off, you will end up with a infinite amount of redstone. And eventually, it'll go a little bit crazy. And unless we stop this, it's probably going to end up crashing the server. But yeah, Botania, still pretty powerful. Don't let anyone tell you it's not powerful, because it definitely is. You just have to have a little bit of a fun time generating mana, but you can make some absolutely crazy farms with Botania. It's definitely on par with Mechanism. It's not quite as good as it was in 1.16 because they've disabled all the trinkets and everything, but if you stop seeing this as like a magic tech mod and you just see it as a farming mod, it is one of the best farming mods in all of Vault Hunters. We're going to stick this one in A tier alongside Mechanism. Okay, now it's time for my beef with Thermal Expansion, because Thermal Expansion is going in the D tier. So what is my problem with Thermal Expansion? Well, it basically offers nothing that Create, Mechanism, or Botania doesn't do better. There are 2 exceptions that we've found to this. The first one is turning water into ice, and the second is turning water into snowballs. The interesting thing about snowballs is you can just, turn them into a bit of an avalanche, because they'll just keep duplicating. And yeah, when one of your 2 things that your mod is actually good for is being outclassed by this, Well, yeah, actually, we should stop this before it breaks the server. But yeah, it's not that great if you can just duplicate snowballs like that. I think it's pretty easy to get one snowball. Oh yeah, and speaking of ice, what if we just appear here? And then we have basically unlimited ice. Yeah, this is my problem with thermal. So yeah, there's not really that much benefit to unlocking thermal. I don't know many people that have benefited from it, with the exception of the next mod we're going to look at. But yeah, I think of the 4 mods that we've looked at, this one is by far the weakest. Yeah, the others are just outclassing it by an absolute mile. And I know a bunch of you are going to go, oh hell, what about the Phytogenic Insulator? Well, that's a good point. What does the Phytogenic Insulator do? For the low cost of 1 Echo Pog and 2 Black Chromatic Steel, you too can grow flowers and moss, which can be done with bone meal, and sunflowers, which can also be done with bone meal or botany pots. The only thing that the Phytogenic Insulator does well is getting extra logs. And while that is pretty impressive, guess what can also be used to make logs? Create! That's right, you can just make a Create tree farm. So yeah, the Phytogenic Insulator is alright. It's a decent quality of life improvement, a 1-block solution, but the fact that you need to unlock the rest of thermal to even look at this makes it much worse than it needs to be. I'm actually going to drop this down to C tier. I originally had it in B tier, but it doesn't really do that much, and you need thermal for it, so it is going solidly in C tier. Okay. Rant over. Okay, so our last 5 mods, and to be honest, they don't really need too much explanation either. So Simple Storage used to be up here, S and A tier, but they removed the crafting grid for it. It's very buggy and can randomly delete your items. That being said, if you're doing this as your very first mod, then potentially it's actually quite good, but realistically, if you've unlocked it, you're going to be wanting to replace it as soon as you possibly can. It still has some early game utility though. We're going to stick it in C tier. Weird Engadgets. Again, used to be decent for chunk loading. Honestly, not that good anymore. You can only get about 5 hours from them before you need to log back in again. And in Vault Hunters, especially 1.18, that's not really that useful. So this one is going straight into D tier as well. Dark Utilities is a fantastic mod. It is used to move around your mobs in your mob farm, and it is relatively cheap. The only downside is that it makes modular routers more expensive, but you can use it in conjunction, or you can always use Create belts instead of these, but I still quite like it. It's very simple and nice to use. I'm actually going to put this in B tier. I was very tempted to put it in A tier, but when I'm looking at what's already in A tier, I don't think it's quite as good as some of these mods, so it's going to go in B tier along the other convenience mods. Now, I've been researching XNet for a while, and I'll be honest, I still don't fully understand it. It's one of the most confusing mods that I've ever seen in my entire life, and I so far don't know anyone that's actually unlocked it and made good use of it. However, having looked at it for a while, it basically seems like a less good version of modular routers. However, it can do a lot more than modular routers if you know how to use it. Some people on YouTube have just done crazy stuff with it and it looks really powerful, but you know, it's way beyond my level of comprehension. So we're just going to put it in about mid-tier, because I think most people are never going to encounter this one, and it's very confusing, but also quite powerful. So I think put it along Dark Utilities in B tier. It does a sort of similar kind of thing. Well, it's more about energy movement and item movement and all that sort of stuff. It's closer to modular routers. Anyway, let's just drop it for now. This is roughly where I feel comfortable putting it. If you are an XNet expert, then make sure to leave a comment on where it actually should be. And then finally, the thing that caused the biggest argument on the stream when we were looking at these, Digital Miner. I love it. Chat hates it. I think it should be A tier. Chat thinks it should be D tier, so we're going to put it somewhere middle of the road and put it in B tier. And that's it. That is every single mod in Vault Hunters, with the exception of the Vaulter Automation and Automatic Genius. That's where we are going to leave it for today though, everyone. If you did enjoy the video, make sure to like it. If you want to see more content like this, make sure to subscribe. I've been Hellfire Mage, and I will see you next time.